started investing in investment real estate in 2010, and I remember buying sort of a ranch-style bungalow on the mountain, and I think I paid $215,000, and I rented that. I rented it for I think $1,550 or something like that. It was a rent-to-own, and I was able to give the tenants $200 a month in the rent-to-own program. So they would take that $200 and they would save it, and I still had $200 in cash flow. You think I can do that now? $215,000 and $1,500, and it covers everything?
No, probably not.
Right? No? Okay. So that was kind of like when it still made sense, like 2008, 2009, after the great financial crisis. For those of you who are old enough to remember that, you could buy a property, but then as the years progressed, we started having to get creative, right? We started having to add additional units or, do student rentals and things like that to get cash flow. And so I would say from 2015 until probably the last 3 years, it would still make sense to buy a house, do 2 units, and still get that cash flow. But it's been more and more difficult. And that's why we want to talk about some new strategies that are coming down the pipeline with regards to policies to make it easier for people to actually get that cash flow back, even in today's interest rates, right? So I'll have some examples of that. So we started our company in 2015. I started doing it consulting on the side while I was still working as a full-time educator for Carson Dunlop, which is a home inspection company in Toronto. Since then, we've worked on actually over 400 right now, second suite, 3-unit conversions, as well as garden suites in the past year or so. We've been really ramping up things on that front. And when I first started in 2015, 2016, it was just myself. Now we have a team of around 6 people, and then we have some other contractors as well. Okay, so you guys ready to do some multi-units?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah? Okay, not that, right?
That's my amazing.
How about this one? It's like some multi-units? That's pretty cool, huh? A little better? Yeah, very organic-y and like, hippie? Okay.
Whimsical?
Okay, whimsical, I like that. Not that either, right? Nah, not that, right? Okay, so what we want to avoid is a Frankenhouse. I was trying to get the animation, the shaky animation. Okay, so what we want to avoid a Frankenhouse. We want it to be a nice property. Okay, so this is not what we want. Okay, we don't want tiny houses either. They're cool, but people get confused. They watch a lot of HGTV and they want to be able to build a house because they're fed up with living that suburban 3,000 square foot home, and then they move into 150 square feet, and then they want to kill each other. We're not talking about that either, all right? Okay, so this is what we're talking about. This is actually a rendering of a client of mine who actually did a conversion on her property. I actually have updated pictures, but this was her the bungalow that she bought, and she added in a second unit. She went a phased approach. This was around 3 years ago. Was able to refinance, and then she built this garden suite here. And so this is renting to 3 separate families on the Hamilton Mountain. Okay, so before we begin talking about some of the opportunities and showing you some examples, everybody familiar with Bill 23 or have at least heard of Bill 23? It's been in the headlines a lot in the past year at the provincial level. Okay, so it's a very complicated document. Directed mainly towards large developers like big subdivisions or big condo buildings, but kind of buried in there is some stuff that is suitable for us, the smaller investor, to be able to do things to add value to the property, boost cash flow, and kind of make the properties work. Okay, so some main rules around this is that the summary of Bill 23, can everyone see this? It's not being blocked, right?
No.
Okay. So they're allowing up to 3 units on any urban property, and this is considered gentle density. So these are some highlights of some of the rules. They can't enforce more than 1 parking space per unit, okay? And we're exempt now from development charges. So in Toronto specifically, you're exempt from development charges up to 4 units, converting a single family home to 4 units, and you can even build an additional detached unit in your backyard. And so, whereas in the past, you would have had to pay potentially $400,000 to convert a single family to 4 units, right? So now that that's gone, you can take that away from your pro forma, and it can potentially make a lot more sense now, right? So the requirement in every municipality is that they're going to exempt this charge, which used to be tens of thousands of dollars at a minimum, to 0 if it's 3 units and under. Okay? So from a policy side, that's really changed things quite a bit. So from what I understand right now, the City of Toronto and Hamilton has gone even one step beyond, allowing you to build 4 units. And the great thing about in Toronto is that if you build a garden suite in your backyard, they eliminate all the parking. So you can turn, like a home like this, you can turn it into 4 units and build a garden suite, and all you're required to do is provide 2 bicycle parking spots.
For all 4 units?
Yeah, for everything. So they have eliminated all the parking in Toronto. So that's Toronto proper.
So where the cars are supposed to go?
Yeah. Yeah, so it essentially, they're saying we'll let the market and we'll let the homeowner determine that. Now, I'm not suggesting that you don't want to have any parking spaces, right? But they don't make it a requirement. So you, as an entrepreneur, as a landlord, decide, is this property going to be worth more if I have 2 parking spaces? And I would argue that yes, especially if it's an area where you don't have access. But if you have a property on, I don't know, on the Bloor subway line or something like that, Bloor and Ossington, right? You're not going to have any problems renting that out with 0 parking spaces, right? So it's great that they now allow you as a homeowner to decide if it's going to be something that the market demands. Any questions about these? Okay, so we talked about markets that allow 4 units so far. We have Toronto and we have Hamilton. So I encourage you to go onto the websites to get more information. You'll be surprised how much information you can get here in terms of what you can do. I would recommend everyone check out the zoning maps. So if you have particular properties in your portfolio, or if you're looking at property, I highly encourage you to just type in interactive zoning map. Whatever the city is, you type in interactive zoning map, City of Kitchener, City of Toronto, City of Hamilton, City of Guelph. You'll be able to pull up your property, and then usually there's a link there that will tell you what you can do with that property. Can I convert this to 3 units? Can I build a laneway house here? Can I sever this property and build 2 houses based on the size of the lot? So there's a lot of information that's there for free that you can all access. All right, so I want to show you guys some kind of really high-level designs and options kind of based on what we discussed, right? So, at a very simple level, let's talk about some 3-unit options, right? So if you had a 2-story, this is, an older century home, right? Very simple configuration is you can have 1 unit, 2 units, and 3 units in the basement. This is a property where we were looking at in the city of Brantford. This was a back split, and we were looking at potentially turning this one, the main level and the upper level, into Unit 1, the lower level and the basement into Unit 2, and there was actually a garage as well that we wanted to consider turning into a studio. So those are things that we're doing as well. We're helping clients convert well-built attached and detached garages into additional units. Here's my property. This is in Brantford, and this is something that I haven't done. I actually only have 2 units on this, but what you could do is you can have 1, 2, and 3 if you like in this configuration, right? This is a very common, type of mid-century bungalow that a lot of people are interested in. So this is a possibility. On this property, instead, I had 1, 2, and I built a garden suite in the back. Okay, so if you have a large, deep property, you can potentially build a garden suite. You can also have an addition. So this here was an existing addition from one of my clients. This is also in Hamilton. And so they had a unit on the main floor and the top floor, and then a basement unit. And this was an existing rear addition that they're considering turning into just a studio apartment as well. Okay? So there's various different configurations that you can do. effectively, if you have the structure, if you can meet all the building code requirements and all the local bylaws, right? So local bylaws are things like parking, setbacks, the unit sizes, all that sort of stuff. If you're able to meet that and the building code, you can pretty much do what you need to do to kind of get that into multiple units and get that cash flow going, okay? So right now, that's what we're seeing is that for people to, especially in this environment right now where the rates are higher, we really have to get creative. So one project I was working on with my friend Charles, it was also a Century home in Hamilton, and we converted it legally into 3 units. Now the 4th unit in the basement, the height was a little bit low, so they're gonna have that as a flex space, okay? So a flex space is not a legal term. Well, this is flex space, right? It's not a legal term, but a lot of people use that to say, it's gonna be a finished space and there might be like a kitchenette or a wet bar or something where they can maybe use that for short-term rentals. Obviously there's tax implications right now with that, but these are environments where we have to get creative. Now, when we worked on their project, we were able to actually convert their single family into 3 units. I think the total amount that they spent was, they purchased it last year for $725,000. They put in about $300,000 to legally turn it into 3 units plus that flex space. And even without the flex space, they're cash flowing in today's rates at $700. And hopefully, if rates come down, that's going to increase even more, right? So if you guys are able to make the numbers work today, even if it's slightly above cash flow, I think you're going to do very well, once rates come back down and hopefully property values continue to march upward, right? Yeah. Any questions so far with some of these configurations? Yes.
They're all self-contained units.
Yes.
They all have separate entrances. Do they necessarily,
Correct.
in Hamilton, are you putting laundry rooms in all of them, or, yeah?
Yeah, we've done a couple where it's shared laundry, but we find that when people have dedicated laundry, you're just getting a higher tenant profile. So we always encourage people to have separate laundries as much as possible. Even if it's smaller units, like 24-inch units. And a lot of times we'll have it put in the staircase where it becomes kind of that separation between the units. But generally speaking, unless it's a student rental, people find that it's just more appealing to kind of have their own laundry. And these days, I think a lot of middle income people are accepting the fact that one unit, whether it's 1 unit out of 2 or 1 unit out of 3, is kind of the norm, right? And it's not something that is kind of frowned upon. But when I started looking at these things, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, I mean, they were all like dungeons and they're not in good shape, right?
Yeah.
But now, because you have a big segment of the population that's essentially priced out of the real estate market to own, they, if they're renting, they still want to rent a nice place so they can afford a little bit of a nicer finish. And so I always encourage people to use nice finishes, use hard surface countertops, like your own laundry, and even purchasing, like people that can afford to purchase, in order to kind of help them out, they'll have like a mortgage helper, right? So they would really want to have 1 unit. So I work with a lot of clients where they're the homeowners, but they're like, we just can't afford it, right? Like all of our money's going to this house. Can I put a unit in here and like rent it out, right? So house hack, right? So this is the norm.
One more question.
Sure.
Sorry. What do we call it in the back?
Yeah, garden suite.
What is the minimum square footage that they usually
I'll show you some
allow?
examples.
Okay.
But generally speaking, to make it work, you probably want to do something that's at least 400 or 500 square feet. A lot of the new builds that we're working on, they're sort of between 600 to 800 square feet.
Okay.
That's kind of the sweet spot for like a lot of the backyards, right? So I'll show you some examples.
If you put 3 units in, can you still do a garden suite or only in the places that allow 4?
Good question. So yes, only in the places that allow 4. So actually no. Yeah, Hamilton depends on the zone. So R1 and R1, actually I think all of the single family residential zones allow them right now. Okay. So you can do 3+1. In Toronto, you can do 3+1 as well.
Can you do 5 in Toronto?
You can do 5. So it's 4+1. Yeah. So
And you can have Ajax to 4 units as of right now too.
really, on the main house?
I don't know if they've decided what that means yet. They haven't
Yeah.
determined, but they have announced 4 units as of right.
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of the direction that we're headed. Is that there's going to be higher and higher density, And so, we still have to comply with all the codes and the bylaws, but if we're able to do that, we can actually do the conversion.
When you have 5 units, do you have to upgrade the electrical or anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's a big component of it, right? Ensuring that everything complies with the various, electrical codes, plumbing codes, gas codes, stuff like that. So there's quite a bit of work. There's, the difference between a 2 units. So in the building code, 2 units and under, so 1 and 2 units, is actually labeled as a house. They actually added the word house in the building code not that long ago, like 5 years ago. So anything that's 2 units under, they categorize as a house, whereas anything 3 units and above, they actually categorize as a small building. So even something like this, if you had like 3 units, like if you had 1, 2, 3, this is considered a small building. And a lot of the building code implications are more stringent, like fire separation, fire alarms, emergency escape, all that sort of stuff. So you just got to be aware of that you can achieve those things, right?
Sorry, quick question about
Yes.
the noise. How or sound traveling between units in one that's side by side or one above the other? How does that mitigate it?
So we are required to comply with the building code for sound separation, right? So there's a fire and sound insulation that we have to install on the floors, and then also install metal resilient channels and drywall, like fire-rated drywall, and that mitigates the sound. It's not going to be perfect, but even if you're like, at an apartment building, like if, somebody's jumping up and down, you're going to hear them, right? I think most people understand that. If they're going to be living in the basement, they know that there's going to be some noise as long as it's reasonable. So there's ways to mitigate it. You can add additional, like sound separation materials, right? But obviously, like if it's a separate structure like this, that's better, right? So this chart, this commands a premium, right? So this is like a very typical arrangement right now with, I would say, anyone that's doing, 3 units in this configuration. A lot of people are, doing this and renting it out and then refinancing it and then building this. It's kind of taking a phased approach, right?
As long as the price keeps going up.
Yeah. Well, the government keeps printing money. I think it's going to happen. Yeah, sorry, somebody, yes.
In Hamilton, for the garden suite,
Yeah.
how long does it take you to usually get the permits? Like, I know Hamilton's long, but
Yeah.
the drawings are probably
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, no, they're not perfect, but Hamilton's, the city's definitely,
Months for an
You?
8-unit permit,
For-
for 8 units. it's
for 8 units, okay, so
8
that's,
months.
yeah,
Yeah, for permits in Hamilton.
yeah, so I think maybe, that number corresponds with the number of months, right?
Maybe.
So if it's 3 units, it's going to be 3 months. Yeah, that probably sounds about right.
So you have to factor in the burn.
Yeah, so I would say typically, we do a lot of 2 units, a lot of 3 units, and now we're doing 4 units. It's kind of in the 2 to 4 month range at best.
Okay.
And then sometimes, if there's complications with, utilities and things like that, it could take longer. So that's the one challenge that we're having. Even though the policy has made it easier from the provincial level and even from the municipal level, because they're allowing these, there's still a lot of bottleneck with the city, right? So it's not like all of a sudden these rules change and you're going to see things popping up everywhere. That's not the case. Like in other markets where they've relaxed the rules, like especially in the West Coast, people think that all of a sudden you're going to get every house turning into 4 units and then the garden suites everywhere. But that's not the case, because even though the policy has changed, it's still difficult with the permits and of course all the other stuff with construction, right? Especially now with the financing, with construction costs, labor, materials, all that stuff. There's still a lot of complications. So it's really just one hurdle that's been removed.
Have you found that municipalities though as well are interpreting Bill C-23 a little bit differently? Because I know we're finding that in the East End, that when you said they can only say 1 parking spot per unit, we have a couple municipalities that are saying, well, the primary still has to have 2, but additional units beyond the primary only have to have 2.
Yeah. So
There's a lot of variation from one municipality to the next, how they interpret it, I find.
Yeah. Some will say any additional unit is 1.
Yeah.
So some municipalities that aren't as progressive, they will kind of try to use interpretation to make things a little bit more challenging. So there's a handful of municipalities that I will just not work with, because I know that it's just going to be.
What are they?
We'll talk offline. It's
I think St. Catharines.
St. Catharines has been they've been challenging, but there's a few cities between Toronto and Hamilton that are.
Clarington's really, really good.
Yeah, yeah. There are some cities like I'll say some really good cities is Kitchener and Guelph. They very helpful and they've been very progressive as well. I mean, Toronto it's a big city. Obviously it's not easy because there's so much involved and they have so much to deal with, but they do pretty good, and Hamilton as well. So this is oops. How do I go back here? Yeah, so this is actually a Toronto property that we were also working on. So this is, your typical kind of, Victorian or Edwardian type home, over 100 years old. So if you can get the entrances, usually there's going to be a staircase, like a common staircase, that can potentially be used as a common entrance to all individual units. But in this case, there's also a fire escape in the back, right? Because you need that. If you don't have a dedicated entrance, you have to have a separate means of egress, right? So you want to be careful with a lot of these older homes if you want to maximize the units, is you need to make sure that they have a proper second means of egress. I really like being creative with some of these, newer homes. And when I say newer homes, like I actually mean like 1950 and up. Okay, a lot of people might not consider, mid-century newer, but I find a lot of, mid-century and up, and some of these homes, there's a lot of ways that you can get creative, right? So one example is, this is a very typical post-1980 wood frame brick home, right? I mean, these are everywhere in subdivisions. You don't have a huge yard in a lot of these homes, and so it's very difficult to, build a garden suite. But something like this, if it was in a good neighborhood where you had access to public transit, you don't need a whole ton of additional parking. You probably have 2 parking spaces. You can potentially have your main unit, as your main floor, second floor, right? A regular family can live there. Large footprint in the basement, you can have maybe 2 one-bedroom units, or maybe 1 one-bedroom unit, 1 two-bedroom unit. And then a double-car garage, you can have a really nice, comfortable one-bedroom unit, right? So think about a property like this in Toronto with access to public transit. Like, this is going to be very valuable as a rental unit, right? This one, we actually did the 4-unit conversion. This is on the Hamilton Mount near Mohawk College, and they converted. So when they approached me, they said, okay, we want to do 4 units. How do we want to do this? And we had to kind of take a holistic approach, right? Because we said, okay, well, you can build a garden suite. Maybe you can do another addition. But what if we just take the existing structure and convert it, what was on the existing structure, to maximize that without having to build new, right? Because it's kind of cool to say, yeah, you're going to build another structure, you're going to build an addition, but then you have to look at the numbers and see if it makes sense. And you just got to run the different pro formas and say, okay, if I build a second story, what's that going to cost? If I build a garden suite, what's that going to cost? Or if I just take the interior, and instead of just doing 2 units, what if I did 4 units? And that's what we did. We ran all the numbers. They ran the numbers, but I gave them the ideas. So instead of doing 1 unit and 2 units, they said, okay, let me convert this 3-bedroom main floor and this unfinished basement to 4 one-bedroom units. And in that area, they were able to rent 4 one-bedroom units for $1,500 each. So this is a $6,000 net operating income.
How much did they buy it for?
I don't remember the exact number, but a property like this in Hamilton is probably like unfinished. It's probably right now is probably around 6, yeah, 556, right?
How much was the renovation?
I don't know the exact number, but think about it this way: like if you were to do, a lot of these second units, they would spend maybe 150 in the base, 125, 150 in the basement, maybe 40 to 50 on the main floor if they have to gut it, redo the kitchen, redo the bathroom, redo the flooring, paint, trim, all that stuff to kind of make it really nice. Now all you're doing is you're doing the same thing, except now instead of 2 kitchens, you have 4 kitchens and you have 4 baths, right? So the additional cost, it's nominal. Like it's not like times 4. It's not like $100,000 times 4, right? But the numbers work really well. Like they were able to rent each one for $1,500, right?
How big is it?
It's about 1,000 square feet, so you have each unit about 500, roughly. Yeah, and we're easily able to get individual access to each unit. So I'll show you the floor plan, actually. So this is the existing main floor, right? Very typical, they come in here, kitchen, living room, 3 bedrooms. existing basement. It was kind of partially finished. They had some like old fireplace there. So this is the main floor. So the proposal was that, yes, you can see coming in here, this is the one bedroom here. There's a side entrance, and then there's a one bedroom here, and this is kind of the common kitchen living room. In the basement, we actually had to, you can see the entrance. It's a laundry here, but this is because it's in the basement view. This is where the entrance is. We actually had to create a basement walkout for this. So they couldn't share this entrance. But just the overall design layout, you can see it's kind of the same thing, right? Like you have your bedroom back here, and then you had a one bedroom there as well, okay? So you're gonna start seeing a lot of these types of more creative configurations. And the idea is that you kind of wanna keep it looking like a single family house from the outside, right? Again, let's avoid the Franken house. Neighbors aren't gonna appreciate it. It can potentially like damage the value of your property. But if you kind of focus on making it look like a single family home from the outside, but still inside it's going to function as a multi-unit, there's going to be a lot of value there. Okay?
You won't piss off your neighbors.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. So this is a big lot. We even had some separation of outdoor amenity space, because that's a big selling feature as well. I mean, this is a really huge yard, right? So we actually kind of had some really rough ideas on outdoor space for them. Sorry, I mean, this is really just rough. Like it was, the permit drawings were a lot more detailed. Here's another gentleman we're working with where he wants to have, he already has an existing duplex here, and he wants to build the third and the fourth as an attached. So we're proposing to build this here and then have your main floor as your third unit and the basement as the fourth unit. And this is actually the site plan that we pulled from it. I don't know if you can kind of tell. You see it's kind of like a T shape here, and then you have this, this part here jutting out. So this is the existing house, and this is the third and the fourth unit. And so one of the things that we have to really consider is, excuse me, is the site planning. Because now, you have a single family home, maybe it's a duplex, and now you're adding 2 additional units, right? So it's not just the structure. How is it going to function? What's the dynamic going to be like when people are using it on a day-to-day basis? So we want to focus on as much privacy as possible, right? So that people aren't bumping into each other. So that's one thing that we really look at, like holistically, looking at property and saying, okay, if we're going to be building this here, how's that going to function on a day-to-day basis, right? So something like this, you might have a fence down here. There might be the yard space that's accessed by this. And then here, there's a yard space accessed by the third and fourth unit. You can maybe even further subdivide it. So, every property is unique, right? We don't necessarily say that you have to do, 3 units and you have to build a garden suite, right? There's so many factors. You have to look at cost, as we mentioned. You have to run the numbers to see if it makes sense. Sometimes the numbers don't make sense. Sometimes it's just, okay just to have, your existing house into 3 units. And then you have to look at the site, right? Like, is it going to function, as if it's really tiny? And in some cases, it doesn't matter. Like if you're in downtown Toronto, it doesn't matter. Like people are used to, having maybe just like a small section of a deck or a patio space, just so that they can put a little table or something. They're happy with that, right? So you got to look at the market, you got to look at the site, look at the numbers, make sure it all works. So this is getting technical, but if you look at something like this, this is where the wall would be, and then we would have the additional unit on this side. So then we would be eliminating windows too, right? And then you'd have to figure out, okay, I need to put in a new window somewhere else. Yeah, so this is on the main floor. So this is the deck. And then if we're putting in on the main floor a new structure here, we're losing these 2 windows, right? We'd have to make this window bigger to get the lighting in. And then because this area is going to be accessed by the new units, we probably have to redirect the stairs of the deck on this side, okay? So just some technical details. This is just one example of things that you have to consider when you start adding in all these units. Yeah, here's another example. You can have, for the cities that allow this, you can have one, you can have 3 here, and then you can have a garden suite as well. Yeah, so those are my examples. Any questions? Yes?
When you build those garden suites, this isn't a stupid question, but does your property go up in value? Because like if I'm gonna throw a garden suite at the back of my yard,
Yeah.
is my house gonna be worth significantly more than my neighbor's all of a sudden?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's tricky right now because there's not a lot of them in the market.
Right.
So most of the people that are approaching us to build these right now, they're interested in the cash flow, and not so much, being able to sell it or being able to reappraise it at a very high value, right? Yeah. So exactly. So you have to have another investor that is looking at as a cash flow. As a matter of fact, it probably doesn't make sense to build it to sell right now, right? So I built a garden suite in my property, and it actually appraised for, like the overall property, it appraised for lower than what I spent on it. A lot of that was a function of the market too. Like from the time I built it till now, things have shifted, right? But you know what, for me, I'm holding it long term. The money that I put in, I didn't have ready cash available. I had to take money from a line of credit. I did refinance the main house to take some capital out, and then obviously I have to pay a mortgage on that, and then I had to take out line of credit. The rent that I'm getting for the garden suite covers those expenses, right? So from my perspective, if I'm holding this for 5 years, 10 years, or even longer, I'm okay with that, right? So it is tricky right now with garden suites because of the fact that obviously the market has shifted. And then the other thing also is, a lot of appraisers, they don't really know how to appraise it because they don't have proper comparisons right now. It's going to take time, right? So in jurisdictions, in markets where you do see a lot of this, like in the West Coast, in Alberta, in BC, in the US, they've been at it for 10, 15 years. The bank's starting to recognize them because they're starting to see them a lot in the marketplace, right? So you're kind of, we are, early in the game, okay? So that's kind of my intent. And then the other, a lot of clients that want to build these, it's kind of a personal reason. Like they may have their, retired mom or somebody that's living there, so it's a family dynamic, but they know that this is still going to be a valuable asset, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're really thinking about it, like whenever you build a property, you're paying for the land and the property. Here you already have the land, right? So that effectively is zero, especially with the development charges that are gone now, right? So, it's value that you can build. It's just that from a financing side, they don't recognize it yet. But in the long term, it should go up in value. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. Don't
Yeah.
build one.
Yes.
What's the cost on average to build one of those garden suites in your backyard, say in Toronto?
Yeah, it can really vary. And as long as you don't ask me what the cost per square foot is, it's very tough. Like we actually even had one where it was a single car garage. It was like 200 square feet, and we managed to convert it into like a studio, right? And it was perfect. It was in the Westdale neighborhood in Hamilton, and it's being rented to a nurse that's like working at the hospital. And it works really well, but they paid like, $150,000 to convert the single car garage. So it's not cheap, right? When I was speaking to the gentleman in Windsor, he actually can build from scratch, foundation, building everything on site, connecting all services for $170,000. I'm like, I need you to come here and do that, right?
Into the modular home?
What's that?
Do you use the modular?
That's an option. That's an option. We've had a lot of people that have approached us saying that they want to offer our clients the modular options. And right now, the price points, it's still, it seems like on-site is still cheaper. And I think that going forward in the coming years, it's going to come down in price because there's going to be more, automation, there's going to be more facilities, less transportation costs. But for the time being, it's still the price is very competitive. And I think it's just because we're so early on that it's very difficult to run a facility, right? There's a lot of overhead, you're running, there's people in there, it's like running a factory and you're doing stuff on site. Whereas if you're doing this, it's just on site, right? So we find that when we run when we get the quotes, it's on-site still cheaper right now. Yeah. And there's more trades available to do this stuff. Like there's tons of framers and a lot of contractors that can do, you know, a lot of basic construction. Yeah, that's it in terms of some examples. I hope that was helpful. In terms of how we can help, we do designs and permits. Again, we really look at it from a holistic standpoint. We try to look at it from, you know, where you can have cost savings. Because I'm an investor myself, the majority of people that I work with are investors. We're really looking at the numbers, right? And then of course, we work with the city, we get the building permits, we work with the planning departments. You wouldn't believe how many departments there are at the city. In Hamilton, there's like 3 different water and sewer departments that we got to deal with. So we basically speak their language on your behalf. So a lot of investors like that they don't have to deal with them. And then we also have the coaching component during the construction as well. That's really helpful for a lot of people, right? So during the renovation, we provide them with the guidance. We're kind of unbiased third party. So they really value us as, you know, that extra, you know, unbiased consultant that, you know, can give them advice when maybe they're not trusting their contractor maybe or something, that we're there available for them. And again, this is based on experience as an investor. All right. I do have a YouTube channel with a lot of information. So again, this was just a highlight outline of some of the stuff. We get into some pretty good detail in some of the videos here. So if you guys haven't checked it out, I encourage you to go to Sweet Additions, click the like button and the subscribe and all that stuff and the bell stuff. And we have a Instagram, and we also have some guides that you can download as well. They're all pretty short. It's not that thick, trust me. It's like, it's on your phone. You can read it lying down on the couch. And yeah, you can get all these guides for free on our website, and I encourage you to check it out if you have time. And yeah, we really focus on trying to, you know, get creative with our housing, right? Because it's kind of a perfect storm of everything, with real estate prices still high, you know, with the policy changes, you know, all the massive immigration. I really believe that this is going to be a solution. It's a great way for, you know, all of us to be able to invest, benefit from a financial standpoint, make a profit, but it's also contributing to more housing units, right? Because obviously, you know, the government's not doing a good job. They're relying on the private sector to do this, right? So I encourage you guys all to get involved and reach out if you have any questions. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. To learn more about the Max Suite strategy, download our free guides at sweetadditions.com and get started. And if you enjoyed this video, here's another great one for you.